And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, fuck him.
All right, attention on deck. Good evening and welcome to the first live at 5:05 p.m. This is the Executive Perspective on New York's finest retired and unfiltered network. I'm retired Inspector Ron Leyson. Alongside me is my partner, retired Deputy Chief Rob LuKach. Good afternoon, Rob.
Good afternoon, Ron. How you doing?
Doing well. Doing well. We have a lot to talk about today, and we're going to get into a controversial topic you don't usually hear executives speaking about. We're going to speak about quotas in the NYPD. But before we do that, let's get into a couple of pretty important things that have been going on with the NYPD over the last couple of days. First of all, we have two incidents that happened yesterday, two MOS-involved shootings that happened yesterday. One was a ESU detective that was shot while doing an entry into a search warrant.
Ron, I actually worked with Terry Advent, a great guy. You know, he was part of the A team. Really solid. You know, their entry, some people have questioned their entry tactics on it. What I observed, they did make entry initially, and the lead bunker being Terry had the shield up, and the perpetrator shot one round at the shield. Terry decided that they were going to evacuate and do a tactical retreat, which is fine. That's no problem. Normally, ESU is taught to push the fight and stay out of the fatal funnel, which is the doorway, right? So you want to get out of there because really there's no cover or anything else. You're really susceptible right there. So, but Terry decided to back out. And I would say that was a pretty good call because there was also talk that there was a hostage there. So,
Right.
You don't want to endanger unnecessarily to civilians. So they backed out. He then barricaded the apartment. And I think once H&T, the hostage negotiation team, confirmed that he was in fact alone, the team decided to do a re-entry. I believe the couch was in the way. They were able to get the couch out of the way. And during that course of the interaction, Terry ended up getting shot in his arm, and they ended up shooting the perpetrator. So personally, I think it was a great job. Very happy that Terry, survived with a mild, a gunshot wound. But really, in all aspects, it was his textbook. And you know what? Terry went home, and that's more important. And I'll even second what was said earlier in the podcast this morning with Eric and John. That's a promotion right there, right? There's a guy that went out, did his job, and did it in the best way you could, and put himself in harm's way to effect that arrest. So I mean, it was really a good job. So I mean, I understand the perpetrator had a big history, so he probably shouldn't even been on the street. But that's that's what the city's been battling a long time with this whole new reform and everything else, and getting everybody out, bail reform, etc. But my kudos out to Terry and to the team. They did a great job, and all the members of ESU, who I consider constantly, unequivocally do a great job every day.
Yeah, and Patrick Donahue has a good comment here. Advent is the poster child for the A team, a cop's cop. It's easy to criticize from the sideline. How many of the Monday morning quarterbacks have ever carried a bunker in the stack and hit a door? Spot on, Patrick. These guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, that do this job, cops, what they say about ESU, what do they say about cops? When the public needs help, they call the police. When the cops need help, they call the ESU. And this is one of those situations where one of the bravest young men was injured in the line of duty doing what they do best. And then we had a second incident where there was a shooting in the 111 precinct. That's my old alma mater. I was the commanding officer back in 2009 for the 111 precinct. And the station house security post, which a lot of people think is a BS post, especially in the 111 precinct. Everybody says, oh, that's a C house, or one of the slowest houses in the city. It's Bayside's finest, Nassau County West. But anything could happen. This is proof positive that anything could happen anytime, anywhere. So the station house security officer was approached by a male, elderly male, who brandished a firearm, a loaded revolver, and pointed it, refused to drop it. The officer drew down on him, ordered him to drop it, called for backup. More officers came. He still refused to drop it. And unfortunately, with the threat of deadly physical force against them, they had to use their weapons and fire upon them. So we don't know exactly what the situation is with that yet. I haven't seen an update on what was going on with this elderly man. There's talk about suicide by cop and those types of situations, but you never know. And that is just a horrible thing for a police officer to have to deal with, because now these officers had to use their weapon, which is something that you pray you never have to do for your entire career. And most cops don't. Most cops don't have to use their firearms in their entire career. And these officers, my heart goes out to them. My heart goes out to this elderly man's family also, and also to Detective Advent and all the few cops involved in the first incident. So this just shows that you never know what's going to happen. You start the day off with an incident like that. You're ending the day off up in Bayside with another incident like that. It's just terrible what's going on and what cops have to deal with. And it could be anywhere at any time. The other thing that's going on is more political, but us not really going to be talking a lot of politics, but what this political move and the political moves that have been going on does absolutely affect the NYPD. So Mayor Adams' administration had another big hit where over the weekend there was talks that 4 deputy mayors went to him, had a meeting and said, we're going to resign. We're not in line with your administration any longer because of the migrant situation and the fact that he's going to be assisting Trump and ICE, and that's not what they signed on for. So they were going to step down. He had a call with them, according to news reports. He had a call with them on Sunday, asking them to hold on, hang in there. Come Monday, they all dropped their papers, so to speak, wrote a letter to their staff saying, we're going to leave on principle. It's not what we wanted to do. So it's in best interest of what we raised our right hand and swore an oath to and our families that we're going to leave. That left a large void. One of the voids was, once again, the Deputy Commissioner of Public Safety. I'm sorry, I said Deputy Commissioner again. So it's the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety. That was originally Philip Banks. He left during the investigation of the federal investigation after his phone was taken. He left. Then he appointed Chauncey Parker, who has a long history with the NYPD in the civilian stance as a deputy commissioner in the NYPD. He took it over recently, not that long ago. Now, under the charter, I wasn't aware of this, but I found this out on this morning's podcast with John and Eric, that the NYPD actually doesn't fall under the deputy mayor of public safety, which I find very interesting because we've seen from this entire administration that the police department is being run from City Hall. That's without a doubt. So to fill that position, he selected Deputy Commissioner of Operation Kaz Daughtry. Now, Kaz Daughtry has been spoken about many times, that he's been under this administration, been promoted up through the ranks as a detective first grade because he was Jeffrey Madry's former chief of department's driver for his entire career. Then he was made an assistant commissioner when Jeffrey Madry was the chief of department as his chief of staff, a position that they created for him. Then he was promoted to deputy commissioner of operations. Now, the problem is that he's got no supervisory experience. He was never a frontline supervisor. He was never an intermediary supervisor. He was never an executive supervisor. So his first supervisory position was as an assistant commissioner in Chief Madry's office. And every new supervisor makes mistakes. You learn from those mistakes and you become a better supervisor. So the issue that I don't have an issue personally with Kaz Daughtry. I worked in conjunction with Kaz Daughtry when Chief Madry was the chief of housing and I was assigned to the Housing Bureau. I never had any negative interactions with him. He never spoke to me in a derogatory manner. He never disrespected me or my position. I've come up through this department to know that when the chief's driver or the chief secretary gives you a call, they're calling on behalf of the chief. but he never spoke to me in a manner that I've seen him act and seen reports of him acting towards members of the service. And that to me comes with the lack of experience of being a supervisor and learning as you go up. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree, Ron. Just want to jump back real quick to the 111. I just want to say, we had done a podcast earlier with John and Eric, and they talked about the picture of that poor cop that was standing in front of station house security, and those guys were filming him, and they had a cookie in front of him, and they were like teasing him and stuff. It's just that you just never know, right? So you always make sure you kind of keep your space, because that kind of annoyed me a little bit, because that poor cop was just standing there and he was taking the abuse. And you know what that, just like that guy did, pulled out a gun, somebody else could, those two guys that were there that night could have done the same thing. So just be careful and make sure you distance yourself. I know it's hard, but with Kaz Daughtry, you know what I always say, be humble, right? The guy got promoted way up, right? And I know you said not earlier, but as Eric would say, rocket fuel, right? So he got pushed all the way up to the deputy commissioner, and you think that he would be a little bit humble, be appreciative that he was awarded that position. I don't think anybody, myself included, you, would say no to that particular job. We would take it, but I would be humble. I would be thankful. And with me, I saw nothing of the sort from him. He was disrespectful, expected to be respected by other people. And I think you gotta earn that. I'll give you an example in ESU. When I went in as a captain, I didn't know squat about ESU. So I didn't say, what, I'm not a captain and you got to tell me what to do and this is it. And no, you're going to do it this way. You watch, you learn, right? You experience. Like you just said, he didn't come up to the ranks. He didn't have the learning and experience. So he should have been humble and did that. He doesn't. He's a friend of the mayor. Now he gets, deputy mayor. All right. They'll have to go through it. I've said it before. I said it on Twitter today. I know that Tish doesn't report directly to him according to the way the city's charter or whatever is listed, but I do feel sorry for her in a little way, because now he say, I'm speaking for the mayor, you got to do this and you got to do that, and is there going to be a conflict or whatever? I don't know, but yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think he he got the spot, great. I just think he needs to be a little bit more humble. That's all.
I agree with you, and we have seen that the deputy commissioner of public safety, or deputy mayor of public safety, has absolutely had complete control over the NYPD. So it's a non-issue. It's not that he's not going to have control. He's going to have a very large say in the direction of the NYPD and the daily operations of the NYPD, and the upper echelon will be answering to him and the mayor. I just personally think that this is another example. And again, I don't like to talk politics. I don't want to get into politics. I want to talk NYPD and policing in general, what can be done maybe better from our experience to help the rank and file to navigate through the job and give a perspective of an executive that people don't normally get to see, because we are somewhat isolated from the rank and file. However, I will say with this administration, I've seen it time and time again. We talk about that word nepotism. And this again is he being Mayor Adams has appointed Kaz Daughtry to these positions due to his personal relationship and not his skill set. That's my take.
Yes, definitely.
All right. So that being said, let's get into the main topic of the day. The main topic of the day is going to be quotas. And whoa, boy, as soon as that came out, everybody was jumping on it, because quotas is a hot button word, right? We talk about quotas and the NYPD, and are there really quotas? It's a controversial topic. Executives don't speak about it. We're going to give you our perspective on it today. And please bear with us. Hear us out before you start attacking us in the comments about your boss that forced you to do this and forced you to do that. Hear what we have to say about it, because I think that we have a unique perspective. We don't agree on some things. We've talked about this, and that'll come out in our conversation. But I think first and foremost, let's talk about what's the law. because there is a quota law, so to speak. It's section 215A of the New York State labor law. And it says that's discrimination against employees for failure to meet certain ticket quotas. It goes beyond tickets, but discrimination against employees for failure to meet certain ticket quotas. 1, no employer or his or her duly authorized agent, which would be the supervisors below you, right, shall transfer or in any other manner penalize or threaten expressly or impliedly an employee as to his or her employment in a manner including but not limited to reassignment, a scheduling change, an adverse evaluation, a constructive dismissal, the denial of a promotion or the denial of overtime based in whole or in part on such employee's failure to meet a quota. Let's remember that, a quota established by his or her employer or his or her duly authorized agent of A, tickets, and they'll read that, B, arrests, or C, stops. So now let's go down a little further. For the purpose of this section, a quota shall mean a specific number of tickets or summonses for violations of laws for which a ticket or summons is authorized by any general, specific, or local law, which is required to be made within a specific time period or specific period of time. So say, this many numbers by months. And then again, it goes into arrests made for violations of law, in a specific time frame, and stops of individuals. So basically, summonses, arrests, and stops in a certain time frame. So as we know, the time frame is always the month, right? What did you do for the month? Your monthly activity report and things like that. So, Rob, what is your first take on quotas in general with the NYPD? Do you feel that the NYPD, as part of a standardized practice or policy, has quotas?
Well, I hate to go back 35 years, but I'm gonna just for a few minutes. I'm a cop in the 4-1. Somebody told us, I think it was a squad sergeant, told us the numbers were 3, 10, and 20. At that time, C summons didn't even matter, right? So it was 3 red lights, 10 movers, and 20 parkers. So that was the number. That they're giving us a number. They're not telling us any other reason, but that's your number. And it came up to be like, hey, you got to pay the piper, you got to pay the rent. That's just what it was. So I remember one time I was on a strike post for 20 days, the whole month. I was on a strike post. I literally would get a ride. It was face-to-face relief, right? So that means they have to wait for me there, and I have to literally meet with the guy that's on the post, and then I take the post and he can go back. So I'm face-to-face relief, getting rides there for 20 days. At the end of the month, what does my squad sergeant say? How come you have low activity? I go, Sarge, low activity? I says, you put me on a strike post for 20 days. He goes, I don't care. You still got to get me those numbers. Okay. So that's where I say, yeah, it sounds like a quota, right? So, is it the terminology change? That's how I feel it does. I say there's a quota, so that's my personal opinion. We use a quota though, in some respects, because what happens is at that point, there was no traffic agents assigned to the NYPD, right? It was just cops, and traffic agent was the brownies at that time. They had their own, department. So if we wanted to express our opposition to the CO, we would stop writing, right? And then the CO would be like, well, up in arms, what do they need? What do they want? There's something wrong going on here. Or when the union said, hey, we're going to do a slowdown. It's not legal. It's not legal. And I never did a slowdown, no. But hey, everybody jumped on board, right? So it was a tool to use. But nowadays, I don't know. I think we'll get into it a little bit more. I don't know. How do you feel about specifically the quotas, even when maybe back when you were a cop?
Well, when I was a cop, there was a number, right? It was 25. Because back when I was a cop in the early 90s, you had a book. A book of summonses was A's, B's, and C's were all one summons, right? You gave the hard copy for a parking summons, the yellow summons for the mover, and the C summons was the white copy. And it was all one copy. And you had to give a book of summonses a month, right? It was 1 C summons, I believe, or 2 C summonses, 5 movers, one of which had to be a red light and the rest were parking summonses. But they didn't specify what they had to be. It was just that was your number and you had to get a collar a month. So those are the numbers that were given out. But what I'll say is I'm talking systemically and as a policy with the NYPD, there is no quotas. There's no quotas. It is a specific number that's given to meet by the end of the month. So if your boss is doing that, your boss is not doing the right thing. There's a way to go about getting activity, right? There's inadequate leadership and supervision that lead to inadequate supervisors giving inappropriate direction to the members to go out and get numbers. Numbers for numbers are not going to affect a condition. It's not going to affect a crime condition by making any collar anywhere. It's not going to affect traffic conditions and collisions, injuries, and deaths for writing moving summonses for anything, anywhere. You're not going to affect quality of life conditions for writing any C summons anywhere for any offense. And an example I'll give, when I was the CO of the 111 precinct, I might have been the XO, but I think it was when I was the CO of the 111 precinct. And I was looking over the activity. And I was looking at all these C summonses, and I'm like, this is the 111. What are these? What are all these C summonses that we're getting? We didn't have quality of life complaints like you have in a lot of other commands in the 111 precinct. So I looked at it, and I'm looking at the quality, and all these C summonses are for the taxi driver that didn't have his trip sheet up to date. That's a C summons. Is it a legitimate violation of the VTL or whatever the code was, administrative code? Yes. Then you had no name and address on the side of a commercial vehicle. I lost my mind. I did. I brought in my supervisors. I had a supervisors meeting, and I said, can anybody explain to me what this summons means? Nobody could. Nobody could. I said, if we had a burglary condition where white panel vans were being used in the commission or seen in the commission of a crime, I could say, okay, I understand that we're going to write those C summonses because that's going to give the detectives something to look at, because in these areas, you have white panel vans, so that might give them a lead into why these white panel vans were here. So, all right, but nobody came up with that because that's not why they were writing them. They were writing them for no reason. So I said, today it stops. I never want to see another one of those summonses without justification. I don't want to see you hurting a livery driver that's out there busting his or her hump all day, driving people around, trying to make a living, and they don't have the time to keep their trip sheet up. You know, I don't care if they're not documenting every ride so they don't pay their portion to the company, whatever their reasoning is for not keeping their sheet up. That's not addressing the conditions. You're pulling over a driver because they have the robbery sticker on their window that's giving you the permission to pull them over for nothing, just to check to make sure they're okay, and then you wind up giving them a summons. That bothered me to no end. So now I go to Comstat, I get called out. Ron, your C summonses have dropped dramatically. I'm going to put it on me. I'm not going to say, oh, I'll go back to the commander and get on it and get you more numbers, boss. No, I'm going to explain. In the 111 precinct, I don't have those conditions. They're never going to catch me in the 111 precinct and have those pictures. If you remember at Comstat on the big television screens of all the people standing on the corner drinking beers. And you have no activity. You got 311 complaints of drinking in the public and all this other stuff. You're not going to have that in the 111. I don't want you to write the summons. Use your discretion for the guy that's getting off the Long Island Railroad and grabs a beer at the 7-Eleven on Belt Boulevard and is drinking a beer as they're walking home from work. Don't write me that summons either, because that's not a quality of life complaint that I'm getting, that the guy coming home from work in the suit with his briefcase is drinking a beer. Stop the guy if you want to stop the guy. Conduct an investigation. Use your discretion at that point to not write the summons and warn the guy, listen, you can't be walking around with an open container, and take it from there. So I think that it's inadequate supervision, inadequate leadership coming from the top, because we talk about traffic stat, and I saw a comment in here from Rob Nappy. I attended traffic stat for years. That caused precinct commanders like me to make sure we had activity at those locations. Traffic stat was a pain in the ass. He wanted to see all summonses when you went. Now, I know, Rob, why don't you tell us how you felt in regards to Rob's comment there, because we spoke about this earlier.
When I was the XO in the 2-3, I had gone to ComStat, traffic stat, right? So I know as the XO, I went in, when I first got promoted as a captain, I went into the 2-3 and I actually saw that the summonses is kind of dipped down. And I'm an honest mistake, right? So I'm going to admit that it's an honest mistake. I went into roll call and I told everybody, hey, I'm going to traffic stat in the next week and I need can you get me the numbers better? And not really given any type of indication of what. I just need better numbers. So when I went back to the office, one of the delegates came in and says, Cap, you're pretty brand new here. We like you. We just had a CO that left and we wrote a letter to, anonymous letter and, it was telling us there's quotas and stuff. And you coming in a roll call and saying that is kind of same stuff. I'm like, you know what? I apologize. You're right. I didn't give the proper reasoning behind it. And I just kind of looked at the numbers. So fast forward, I said, that's fine. We won't, I won't look at the numbers, I'll start addressing it a different way. And I think you'll go into it a little later, but then going down to traffic stat, it seemed to me like everything was a number. Like there was, how many reds you gave out, how many, this and that. It even put us to stuff that they don't want you to give out equipment violations. That for them, that was a bad traffic summons. And technically, when you think about it, it's a safety thing, right? So I'm not saying you got to give the guy a ticket, but if you pull the person over and say, hey, one of your headlights are out, two of your taillights are out, at least that's something that you're actually helping the citizens rather than just giving them summonses for the point of giving them summonses. So I fared well down in traffic stat because I did have the answers, but I think you'll be able to get into it more with the information you want to speak about. But I just want to touch base with the New York Times article. If we go back to 2010, right? In one of the in the article there's actually a police captain and he's on tape where he can be heard warning the top commanders, which I would assume are his lieutenants and sergeants, that their officers must start writing more summonses or face consequences. And Captain Perez offered his precise number and suggested a method. He said that officers on a particular shift should write as a group 20 summonses a week, 5 each for double parking, parking at the bus stop, driving without a seatbelt, and driving while using a cell phone. So, he later on goes into, your goal is 5 in each of these categories, not a difficult task to accomplish on Monday. Like he's actually giving you a day when you should do it maybe in the beginning of the week, right? And then he added, it's not accomplished by Monday, you got to follow up on Tuesday. And if it's not done on Tuesday, you got it done by Thursday. And he went on and Sunday. And then if you got all your tickets in the middle of or the beginning of the week, then he said Saturday and Sunday are gravy. Then it's your days, right? So, although the article is in 2010, and I'm sure you will talk and maybe speak about how that you felt that captain probably wasn't particularly correct, but that was existing. If I talk about when we first articles early on in 2000, now we're at the 2010, it just keeps coming up, and continually being a problem.
And I'm not going to deny that there are quotas pushed down, just like this captain did. This captain gave a number. He gave a number, 20 summonses, 5 of these, 5 of those, 5 of these, blah, blah, blah. It has to be done. I want it done in the week. Gave that time frame. So this captain technically is violating the law, right? He's telling you, he's giving you a specific number to do in a specific time frame. Now, that's not proper. That's not appropriate. That's inadequate supervision. Instead of bringing his lieutenants in and saying, hey, listen, don't look at the board. Don't look at the board and tell me how many of these summonses I'm down in before I go to traffic stat, because I don't want to get my butt chewed out of traffic stat. How about we concentrate on what's the important thing? How many collisions we have, how many injuries we have, and how many deaths we have, how many fatalities we have due to traffic collisions, right? And then direct your activity and direct your office's focus on those locations. You don't give them a number and say, you have to give me this, that, and the other thing, but say, I need activity in this area because this. It's in response. Everything I always said, one of the things I always said to my people, I never gave a number because I didn't want a number. Because then what's going to happen is they're going to go out there and they're going to give you arbitrary numbers that mean nothing. I want effective activity. Everything that I want them to do, I want to affect a positive change. Affect a positive change in traffic, affect a positive change in a crime condition, or affect a positive change in a traffic condition. And I'm going to push back on you and also Rob Nappy to a point in his comment about traffic stat. My experience for many, many years in traffic stat and going there under several different chiefs of transportation is that when the executive and their team went up there, it was because they were way up in accidents or collisions now, right? In collision, in accidents, in injuries, and in fatalities. And then almost every time there was a correlation. That's what made me a believer in writing the right summonses at the right location, because I saw it in traffic stat. I saw every time a commander went up there or an XO went up there, that if their injuries, their accidents, and their fatalities were up, their activity was down. So they weren't writing enough summonses, let alone the right summonses in the right location. I'm a firm believer of writing the right summonses in the right location. So I've been to traffic stat. I've had numerous people in traffic stat as a borough commander, as a borough executive in patrol borough. I've gone to traffic stat and I've witnessed it, countless amounts of times, where there would be a command that's down in summonses, but yet they're down in all the other indicators, and they don't go to the podium. They don't get yelled at. They don't get talked to about their summonses, because whatever plan they have in place, whether it's because they have less even though they have less enforcement, whatever plan they're working, whatever plan they have is working because their fatalities are down. And listen, sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it when it comes to traffic. But it's not just all about traffic. It's not just all about traffic. I am not denying that there are quotas that are pushed down to the rank and file. There's a lot of comments coming over. My sergeant did this. My sergeant said that. My XO said this. My XO said that. And I'm not denying that. I'm not a denier. I'm not saying that quotas were not pushed on the rank and file. I'm saying it was not. It's not a policy of the NYPD. It's not systemic in the NYPD. And if it is, it's because of systemic, inadequate leadership and supervision. That the executives aren't given the proper instruction to the lieutenants and the sergeants, and therefore the men and women that are out there doing the work every day. So I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that we didn't have a hard and fast number when we were cops. I'm not saying that there aren't commands out there now that still aren't giving hard and fast numbers. And they vary depending on where you work. You know, it's just a fact of life. And so I'm not denying that it doesn't happen. I'm not denying that it's not out there. I'm not denying. We have seen, and you're going to get into it, we've seen case after case of supervisors getting caught on tape. That's why I was never worried about getting caught on tape, because my instructions, my direction, whether it was one-on-one with you in my office with the closed door, whether it was me in front of the desk talking to the troops, whether it was me in front of a roll call talking to the troops, whether it was me in front of a roll call talking to a platoon, my message was consistent. So I didn't have to worry about getting caught about anything. I didn't have to worry about it, because that was my message, was my message. And my truth was, it's easier to remember one story, the truth. Tell the truth, and you don't have to remember what you said because it'll repeat itself in any other conversation. So, and I always try to teach people the same thing. Talk like you're being recorded. So these people are being recorded because they're doing what some of them don't even realize is wrong. They're not even educated enough in their job, in their position, to know what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah, I like what Brian Johnson said, and I had mentioned it earlier, like paying the rent, right? That's what we were taught. That's part of paying the rent. You know what? And to go back to that Times article, that captain even threatened the family. He said, "I don't care about people's families. If they don't want to do the job," he said, "the paycheck is taking care of their family. If they don't realize that they're, going to change, he's going to change their tours." So they'll start being more productive. I mean, this is what he says. Yeah, that's it's pretty crazy. Like he just kind of throws that out there. But yeah, you can even say like summonses. I spoke about when I was in the 4-4 when there was burglaries. I said I need verticals, and all I do is tell the platoon. I was the second platoon commander. All I do is tell the platoon, and they were more than willing to start doing verticals for me so that we could prevent a burglary. But like you said, there was a specific reason for that. I think what
And a
happens
specific
is,
location. They're not going to do burglaries, verticals in Sector Adam when you're getting crushed in burglaries in Sector Charlie. You're going to give them the proper direction that I need verticals in Sector Adam where I'm getting killed with burglaries in high-rise buildings.
right. I mean, so it's just I guess, you can go back and forth. Is there backlash if you don't do it? Then it's problematic, right? So, and what does really productivity mean? But nowadays, this is the way I see it nowadays, is that if you pull somebody over and don't give them a summons, how do we judge that? Well, today we can, right? Everybody has body worn camera. So do I have to judge somebody's performance by the amount of summonses they give? Or can I look and look at their body worn camera and say, you know what? This cop is out there, isn't doing the work that he's supposed to be doing or she's supposed to be doing. They're pulling cars over, but they're showing discretion. They're giving warning and admonishes, because that also could affect an accident location or a collision location at this time too. You don't have to hit somebody over the head every time that they make an infraction, right? You want to be able to give them some sort of discretion. I always looked when I was pulling people over, if you were honest with me and said, "Officer, I completely made a mistake. I didn't know I couldn't make a right turn on red, or from the outer boroughs or whatever." All right, then it's a warning and admonish. So there are other ways to get performance indicators nowadays because of their body worn cameras. I mean, I think that's a great tool. So we don't have to do that.
I'm not going to disagree with you at all. I think that activity is not always the answer. Education is also big, especially in traffic, right? And sometimes even in crime, doing proper education of people on how to protect themselves from being burglarized or robbed, right? Going out there into the community, getting into the community. Chris G has a question. It's a question for Ron and Rob. If you could make changes from the top and bottom and address the quota issue, how would you do it? Would you be fair? Would you be fair in holding supervisors accountable just as much as cops? I think we're going to get into that. Chris G, hang in there with us. We want to discuss a couple other things first before we get into what we feel. And this is how we want to do our show, is we want to talk about the problem and try to come up with a positive solution on how we can get through this, and how you, as the active members of the service that are still out there doing God's work, can get through the day safely and not get yourself hurt administratively also. So we're going to get into how we think that should be done, but I think there's a couple more points that we want to make. And like I said, Rob, that again, those captain's comments, inappropriate. Those captain's comments actually, I think, personally violate the law. And there are ways. And listen, I have brought people in and I have discussed with them what's going on. What everybody else in your platoon, everybody else in your squad seems to be able to go outside average 15, 16 days on patrol, average X amount of radio runs, and is able to observe certain violations. You don't seem to be able to do that at all. Is there an issue? And I would talk to them. At first, I'd have the lieutenant and sergeant talk to them. And then if it came to me, it's like, now it's a problem. It's like, are you doing your job? There has to be some way for us to evaluate our members that are out there are they doing their job? Are they doing their job? And part of their job as law enforcement officers is to enforce the law. If you're answering all these radio runs and never coming in with a collar, it seems to me that that's suspicious, because how could none of these radio runs generate an arrest? If you're out there driving around for 8.5 hours for 16 tours on average a month, I'll give you 16 tours a month. How are you not observing any violations that require being addressed with enforcement? I'm not taking away your discretion. I'll never take away your discretion. Unless I'm with you and I see something that's egregious, I order you, hey, write that guy a summons. And you don't get the guy that goes, I didn't see it. What are you talking about, boss? You write that summons, okay? But Eric's making a good point. It takes more effort not to make the collar a lot of times. And you're also putting yourself at risk because, like you said, body-worn cameras. So now all your jobs are being recorded. So your sergeant's supposed to watch X amount of body-worn cameras. Your lieutenant's supposed to watch them. The executive officer, the ICO, the training sergeant, the commanding officer. Everybody's supposed to be watching all these videos. And if you're bringing attention to yourself by not doing your job, not addressing conditions, there might be a problem. And at that point, and speaking to them in that manner, you may be justified in making a change in their assignment. Again, now that is not punitive for not making a quota. That's not being punitive by changing your platoon. Because, hey, maybe you just don't see the violations at night because it's dark out. Maybe you got to work during the day tour. I don't know. Is that what has to happen? Because you got to go out there and do your job. We're giving you, let me preface this, as long as we as the supervisors, as the executives and the supervisors are giving you the information that's needed to do your job, the information and the tools to do your job properly, to go out there and affect a change, and you're not able to do it, then that's when there's a problem. That's when there's a problem. And that's not punishing you for not meeting a quota. Because I'm not telling you why aren't you coming in with 10 summonses or 20 summonses or whatever people are asking for to address certain conditions. That's you're not doing anything, or you're doing stuff that has no bearing and no effect on any of the conditions that are in your sector. So that's where I have a problem with it.
Well, I know that there was an article where NYPD commanders text show how the quota system persists. And specifically, they talked about the traffic stat package shows day tour was the least productive in the 20-day period, referring to NYPD data handout that compares current and last year's precinct review and discusses it with the guys. They literally say that this was from 2018. They looked at it, and it was another 28-day, looked at the e-bikes, cell phones, and things. So I agree what you're saying, that if you have a condition, you correct it, but then don't do a 28-day period where you have to now compare it to the previous year, right? So you have to be able to address the condition, and then you have to completely eliminate that comparison like they do with CompStat to the previous 28-day period from the year before, because as we know, that's irrelevant, because there might be different accidents, there might be different locations, there might also be other conditions that are causing that. Like you and I had spoke about, the weather is a factor. So, don't always look at a number. Now in 2018, they're still looking at numbers. And I'm sure on the CompStat sheet, right, there's still a little box on the bottom that talks about your A, B's, and C's. So what I always liked was that, and it's actually written in one of the articles, that the cops that wrote the most tickets on the first 2 weeks of the month wrote less on the second half. And the cops that didn't write any tickets on the top half wrote more in the second half. And all right, so that to me, that's a quota. That means they're getting their numbers. Look at
Did
if
we lose Rob?
you go upstate New York, right? Or even if you go on the Palisades Parkway, and I don't know, but the troopers will show all of a sudden there's a whole amount of cops on the highway. You know, I can remember driving home on the Palisades, and you know what? The last week of the month, I kind of stayed within that 55 to 70 mile an hour range because I knew that they were hidden, and I didn't know, maybe it was a new spot they were coming out of. So I mean, that's clear, the statistical. It's done by a Columbia PhD student, right? So they go into the whole thing about how it's all on that. While collisions remain effectively unchanged, officers had to write more tickets in the second half of the month, and this ticket bump down was due entirely to the officers below median ticket productivity in the 2 weeks prior. On the other hand, officers ahead of their peers in ticketing for the first half of the month drastically reduced their tickets at rate in the second. So, you know, are they writing for the fact that they need to write? Or are they all of a sudden, like you said, they're addressing conditions? That's good. But are they all of a sudden the condition dried up in the last 2 weeks of the month?
No.
Hey, I'm still
not
going with there's a quota, and they use different terminology to identify. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Well, let's get into that part. Let's get into, you know, I'll address what you just said because I agree. You know, there's no data that shows that there's more accidents at the end of the month, but there's more summonses. All right. Again, that's people chasing the number. That's people chasing the number. I'm going back to inadequate supervision, inadequate leadership, inadequate direction being given to the members in the field. And you know, I see Edwin Raymond's on, and he's in the chat, and he's saying that it's basically we're given an oversimplified perspective. I don't think it's oversimplified at all. I think that my perspective, 31 years on the job, over 20 years as an executive through many different administrations, I am not denying the fact that bosses are giving out numbers, and it is not, as you said, the next comment, it's not applied equally. Somebody else earlier asked again, how would I try and fix it if I was in charge? That's the thing. You have to have it across the board. There has to be better executive training in order to have the executives understand what their job is not to chase the number. It's not to beat the number. It's just not. And I have, what is the matrix? The matrix, again, I agree. The matrix isn't, so let me beat last year's 28 days. And that's the matrix. All right. I agree. That's not the matrix. Is that what a lot of people do? A lot of people chase the number, try and beat the number. They have their boards up in their office and they say, I have this many crimes or this many summonses, and I got to beat that number. I have to reduce crime. I have to reduce traffic fatalities and injuries. How do I do that? Through education, through enforcement, right? So that's how you do it. And the gauge to me is not that my numbers are down. And I have never cared about numbers. And anybody in the chat, anybody that's worked for me or with me knows I don't care about the numbers. I care about the results. I care about reducing crime. If my numbers are down and my crime is down, that's the success. It was the same thing. They used to give you those overtime tours, and they'd say, oh, your guys didn't come in with 20 C summonses out of the module of overtime, and the borough would be breaking my chops. And I go, they go, oh, you know, so how do you say that was a successful tour? I go, how many 7 major crimes did I have during that 8-hour overtime tour in the zone that they were assigned to? 0. So you know what? They didn't see any violations. They stayed in the zone to try to affect a change in that zone, to reduce a robbery condition or a burglary condition. And that's what you gave me the overtime for, to reduce these crimes. I had no crimes in the time frame that we selected to be the appropriate time frame in that zone. To me, that's the matrix. So if they what you want me to send them down to Roosevelt Avenue so they can grab some C summonses for beer drinkers when they're supposed to be up, by left rack because of robberies and shootings, but they couldn't get any C summonses because the cops were all over the place and guys weren't violating, quality of life offenses. So I've always been able to, and again, that's me. I have no problem standing up to my bosses and saying, okay, the enforcement sucks and crime is up. I have a problem. But if my enforcement's down, but my crime is down, and I've addressed it through my crime plan or quality of life plan, and the plan has worked without blanketing people with summonses and arrests, that's a success. And more bosses, executives, have to take that stance. And that's when I was in Patrol Borough Queens North, I used to try and mentor the younger executives. And that was one of the things I used to teach them. You have to be accountable for your actions and stand up for your decisions that you make. And if that goes against, the numbers or whatever the case may be able to justify it.
Jack, could you bring up Stephen S.'s comment? I just want to read that out. I think he makes a pretty decent point there. He said, I had an idiot sergeant, and who hasn't really, ask me, what did you do all day? I said, I don't. You got to go out and talk to people in my area. They'll tell you. He could also read the DFR, but you can't document a prevent. Right. And that's what I was kind of alluding today. You know what? We have discretion, right, for violations. Why all of a sudden do we have to, justify, and every stop has to result in a summons? I mean, it really is. I'd rather educate the people. And yeah, when summons are deemed necessary, absolutely. I'll just go another step further. Imagine that so if you were going for highway, right? How many summonses does highway looks at that? That's going to be an indicator of whether or not you're going to get into a highway unit. And I don't know, is that fair? Because you could be a good cop, you could be very good, you could issue make a lot of arrests, but all they do is summonses, right? So
okay, but I think let's table that example to the I think that's a good example for our last segment.
All right.
I think that's a good example that we hadn't discussed for our last segment. Again, Edwin Raymond's in the comments, and one of the articles that Rob is referencing is about the NYPD 12, of which Edwin Raymond was part of. And he's saying if crime and conditions plummet and activity also drops, that should be okay. It should be okay. It is okay. That's the answer, and it was totally inappropriate what was done, because I listened, I watched Crime and Punishment. I saw the excerpts of the text messages. I heard some of the recordings. Absolutely inappropriate what was done to them. I know they had a class action lawsuit going on, and to be honest, we couldn't find the results. So I don't know if it's still ongoing, but and his next comment that I'm seeing is, sadly, over and over, we were made to get numbers for numbers' sake. And I agree. Numbers for numbers' sake is poor leadership and poor direction, poor guidance, not giving you the proper direction, the proper tools, and the proper information to perform your job effectively, to affect positive changes in the communities that you serve. And it's not the same answer across the board in every command, because the conditions are not the same in every command. So
no, I agree, because when you talk about you can have a lot of collision locations in your precinct, and the adjoining precinct might not have any, right? Because it gets bogged down by traffic. But you can't go down to a traffic stat where they're going to tell you, well, how come you have this many summonses and that many summonses? So it has to be addressed by the precinct, right? And again, it has to the executive has to make sure that the message filters down to the cop and to explain why they're actually doing this enforcement. I mean, that's the bottom line. Let's get rid of the numbers. Hey, listen, how many guys drive to work and somebody cuts them off, or somebody doesn't use a directional in front of you, and you're like, man, I wish I was working. I'd give that guy a ticket. But then when you get to work, you're like, I'm just driving around, take it easy. I'm not going to give any somethings. But you're
Right.
always going to see safety violations. So I'm saying, you know what? Do what you can, go and address the condition if you have a reason to address it, right? Like you said earlier, you're not going to give guy getting off the train, with a beer in his hand and say, I got you, I got a number, and that's not really the condition. So I agree with you on that. I think there is poor management, and I think it's systemically come down through the police department. There's been no pushback other than the law, and maybe I think you wanted to address, I think it was O'Neill, right, at one point, but it's still, in my opinion, it still continues, and it continues at a lower base, a lower point, but I don't know, is it gonna spark back up again when they start doing these quality of life insurance, quality of life issues? When they start issuing summonses for that, is it going to start going back up again now because the police commissioner mentioned this? Ron, if you just want to, I know you referenced that article. If you just want to touch base about what you read about what Chief O'Neill said.
This is just Chief O'Neill. He was actually Police Commissioner O'Neill at the time. He pledged, wrath against the police department, and the executive. I'm not going to read the article, but basically, he gets into, if there's any quotas, and this is because they lost a lawsuit for inappropriate summonses, for thousands of summonses that were thrown out because they weren't valid on their face. So a bunch, I forget how many people got $150 each in the lawsuit. But basically, they saying the police department doesn't use quotas, and if you get caught doing quotas, you're going to be subject to discipline. Okay. But what did they do about it? Did they follow through? Yeah, he balked. Terry Monahan was the chief of department. Okay. I worked for him when he was the executive officer of Queens North. I had a very good relationship with him. He made the same assertion at a CompStat very forcefully that if you enforce quotas, you will be disciplined. And unfortunately, that was misconstrued by a lot of executives. And everybody backed off asking anybody for anything. And then that's when you saw activity plummet, crime start to rise, quality of life start going through the roof again. Quality of life offenses going through the roof again. And I disagree with that. Again, instead of coming out and just yelling that, they're not going to, do something. Put something in place to help the executives show their supervisors how to go out there and effectively address the conditions in the communities that we serve. And that's what it's all about. And then we'll talk about it. You call it, some people give quotas under the misguise and use different terminologies like performance objectives. I personally use performance objectives. Okay. But I don't use performance objectives as a subterfuge of quotas. Okay. So if you have a performance objectives, right? What are performance objectives? If you want to put that up, Jack, what are performance objectives? At their core, performance objectives are clear, measurable goals, not numbers for numbers, that an employee here at the NYPD is expected to achieve within a set time frame. Again, usually the month is what we gauge their activity and their enforcement through, just as a guide. It's month to month, and then in the quarter, and then the year. They guide employees on what's expected of them and give you a benchmark to assess progress. Again, here it is. They guide employees on what's expected. And that doesn't mean a number. It doesn't mean a number. What's expected is to address the condition, possibly through enforcement, right? And then there you go. How do you set up performance objectives? It's a SMART framework, all right? And again, this is the SMART framework comes actually from the corporate world, but it is absolutely in lockstep with the NYPD. Make the goals specific, right? Go out and address this condition, possibly with this type of enforcement, traffic, quality of life, certain types of quality of life enforcement, certain hazardous violations, because it would address these types of collisions, whatever the case may be. These types of arrests are beneficial. Okay. Measurable. How is it measurable? Again, is it necessarily measurable by the number that you bring in? That's not the measurable I'm talking about. How it's measurable by a reduction in crime, by an increase in the quality of life of the community that we serve, by the decrease in collisions, injuries, and fatalities. Make it achievable. Don't give a crazy expectation. Someone once told me, and I don't know who it was. I don't want to misquote it. I think I know who it was. And if anybody in the chat remembers who this person is, because there's some detectives out there that I think it might have came from the Detective Bureau. But if you give unreasonable expectation, you will garner reasonable results. I don't believe in that. I believe in giving reasonable expectations and holding people accountable and expecting them to meet those expectations. And if they fall short after giving an honest effort, that's okay. Make them relevant. Once again, relevant. This is why you're going out there. You're going out there to address this condition, to help fix this condition, to help alleviate this condition. Because you know what? When cops are spoken to and not spoken at, they are much more willing to go out and do their job when they feel like they're being treated like an adult, and it's being to explain to them as a professional police officer, you need to go out and do this to help the community to be better. And again, make it time bound, because you have to be able to assess and then make changes if necessary. So that's how I feel about performance objectives. I don't feel performance objectives is just another word for a quota. How do you feel about that?
I like what Matt Elliott said. It's apparently it's taken up to 40 minutes to write out a summons and then tagging it with your body worn camera. So I mean, right here he says summonses are different now, and it takes 40 minutes to do it. A paper copy, add it to your activity log, add in the forms, complete the vehicle report, tag your video on Axon. I mean, I question, what is our primary
100%.
goal in law enforcement, right? So is it not safety and reduction of crime? I mean, if you look at, what we're supposed to do, really, when does writing tickets all of a sudden become that one of those primary goals? It became a primary goal when they developed traffic stat. Then all of a sudden there was an onus on, I gotta get these numbers, I gotta get this, and it was number driven, right? So they felt that drive the numbers in, and it became more of more silos, I think, because then you had traffic safety officers within your command, and they were your main guys. And I would always tell them, hey, just write in the collision prone locations, and if the cops didn't want the regular cops on patrol, hey, reduce crime, help the CO out. That's what you're doing. Your omnipresence. You imagine you're sitting in a spot tagging a ticket for 40 minutes. You're literally wasting 40 minutes of times that you could be driving around, and you don't want to be driving around. I wouldn't drive around with all the stuff I got to enter in. I would make sure that I get that done before I continue on patrol, because first of all, it's dangerous. I want to make sure my partner's watching around, making sure that everything's safe around the car while I'm doing this crazy entry for a freaking ticket. I could see where that is even a deterrent. After a while, you're like, this is ridiculous. Why am I wasting this time? So that's just it just doesn't make sense. So I think that was thanks, Matt. That was a great little tidbit for us to use. Thank you.
Yeah, and Rob.
So I like
telling me
Eric talked about salesmen. What?
Yeah, no, I was saying Rob is saying performance objective in quotes equals a quota. I totally disagree with you, and that's why I asked you in the beginning. Hear us out. I understand that there are inadequate supervisors that are pushing actual quotas. Not denying it. But if you follow the SMART outline and you do it correctly, performance objectives work. And I think it was Logic Finance asked if that worked, not just in the 111, but in my busier commands, like the 110, 100%. I had crime reductions in the 110 precinct and I didn't force people to go out there and blanket activity.
Well, if you could put Eric's back up, I liked Eric when he said, you know, if you're a salesman and you don't sell, you know, cars within that month, you have 0 sales for 3 months, so you're still a salesman. Right. So I would say, yeah, you're probably not a good salesman, right? But you could be a good cop because you may have done other things. There's other things for us to do just besides write summonses, right? So you could say, if I didn't write summonses for 3 months, but I made, you know, 3 collars. I answered to 500 radio runs. You know, we're running from job to job. And when you talk about in a precinct like the 7-5, the 6-7, the 4-4, and you're going to tell me that I have to worry about, you know, ticket, you know, writing them certain amount of collision prone locations. I'm running from job to job, especially with the you know, the amount of uniformed officers within the NYPD. So, you know, and then they're stealing people and putting them in the transit, right? So, you know, I say again, where are the goals? Where are the priority? We can readjust what we say. We can readjust our performance indicators, and we can adjust that thing. Like Rob Wilson here says, if you're on patrol in a house and you couldn't get a collar and a few summonses, then you weren't interested in doing your job, you know? So it's definitely a part of it, and you got to stay busy. But I say the right performance indicators and the primary goal and direction. I think we can agree on that. There needs to be appropriate direction and not an emphasis put on any type particular thing, right? So I mean, you could say the same thing for arrests. If I answer a couple domestic violence calls and I've made an arrest, and then okay, I have a couple numbers, but if you're out there, you're gonna come across arrests. So you know, you should be making those arrests as well. So you know, it's when I think when you definitively start putting numbers on something, and you start, I mean, if we have a problem with ComStat, right, when they started putting numbers on UF-250s, and I think it also stems into the summonses. So once you quantitate something that shouldn't really be done like that, it becomes problematic.
I agree with you 100%. And you got Hortense 1234 making a comment. Cops will go after low-hanging fruit to just be on board and not have to hear the BS. And this is another problem with inadequate leadership and supervision, because if you're writing the low-hanging fruit, you're not getting the proper instruction, the proper direction, and the proper supervision of your frontline supervisor, whether it be a sergeant or a lieutenant, before it even gets up to the executive officer. You shouldn't be going after the low-hanging fruit just to get a number, because you should be getting the proper direction to go after the proper violations. That's what we're saying. We're not saying it doesn't happen. I see it comment after comment that when I'm trying to catch up with the comments here. Again, bear with us. We're pretty new at this. So, you know, we're trying to look at the comments and be interactive with you. But I think that we're both saying that there are quotas that are pushed out throughout the department. I don't believe it's systemic in that. When I say systemic, that it is policy of the department. It comes down to inadequate supervision and leadership and not giving the proper direction. If you do that, you will be successful. And again, it's not something that you could say is blanketed across the board, because every community, even different communities in the same command, could have different conditions that need to be addressed in different ways. You know, the 110 was a pretty vast community. I had different conditions in different areas of the command that needed to be addressed by different manners. You know, some was omnipresence, foot posts, or a THV being out by the mall, possibly foot posts along certain avenues. You know, Roosevelt Avenue with the 110 precinct and the 115 precinct combined. You know, and omnipresence was important down there. That was one of the main things that we had to do, was we had to keep cops out there, whether it was impact or IRT or just your own personnel. You had to have a presence on Roosevelt Avenue, whereas in other areas, it might have been traffic enforcement. And so it doesn't have to be a numbers for numbers game. I always wrote on my COs, I didn't do a COs meeting every payday. I didn't believe in that. if I would write things down, I had a specific pad on my desk that when an issue came up, I would write it down. If it wasn't something that needed to be addressed immediately, I'd save it for a CO's meeting. Every few paydays, I would have a CO's meeting. They would go a little bit long because I wouldn't do them every week. And I did an agenda. And at the bottom of the agenda, in a footer, I had in red letters, and I got this quote from Chief Diana Pizzuti, who I worked for many years. And I think I was a little remiss last week when we had our pilot episode and you asked me, Rob, and you caught me a little off guard to name the best bosses I ever worked for. Diana Pizzuti was a person that I worked with for many, many years. She was very mentoring, and I'm still in contact with her to this day. And one of the things that I got from her, it was a quote that she said one day at a borough CO's meeting that I took. It fit me perfectly, and I put it on my CO's minutes. Never compromise your integrity for the sake of activity. That was one of my tenets. I would say that, and it was on my minutes in every meeting. And I wish I had a copy of one, but I lost my thumb drive with all my files, so I could throw it up there to show you. That was a big thing to me. Don't compromise your integrity, because I believe when you're out there and you're writing numbers for numbers, you're compromising your integrity, and you shouldn't have to compromise your integrity. If you go out there and you are armed with the proper knowledge and the proper tools, that's my job as a leader. That's my job as an executive. That's my job as your boss, is to give you the proper tools and the proper information to go out there and do your job effectively. And if you're writing low-hanging fruit, there's a problem with either me or there's a problem with you. You don't care about doing your job properly, so you're just going to bang anybody you can bang to get your number, so you don't think that you're standing out and you're not going to get the BS. Or there's a problem with me not giving you the information you need to go out there and do your job effectively. That's how I feel. That's my perspective.
I like what I think was it Sly Creek? I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
Slick Rick.
But
I think it's Slick Rick.
Slick Rick? Okay, I totally agree with this here. The XOs care about summonses. Only one car out, holding 15 jobs. XO calls and says he wants to do a checkpoint done. I can explain that exactly, because I can tell you
inadequate
why, right?
supervision, inadequate leadership.
That XO is going down to traffic stat. He doesn't have his numbers. He's going to say, you know what? I got to get something. I'll take him to the accident prone location, and I'm going to have them I'm going to do registration checks and inspection checks and, headlights or whatever. I'm going to hit them all here so that I get my dots on that accident location. And then I can go to traffic stat and say, oh no, I addressed this condition. Look at that. That's it. I can tell you when I was in the 2-3, when I had to go to traffic stat, and the CO, John Perno, he would be like, I'm not having them do any summonses tonight. I got to get C summonses because I might be going to Comstat. So it's a conflict between the two bosses, because the CO goes to Comstat, the XO goes to traffic stat. We all got to get the numbers. And who do we beat up? We beat up the poor cop in the street who doesn't know whether I'm worried about an accident prone location or I'm worried about a robbery pattern. That's my take.
I'm not, and again, Rob, I'm not going to deny that doesn't happen, but I am going to say that is poor and inadequate leadership, because that's not what the XO should be doing. XO shouldn't be worrying that it's their borough's turn in rotation, that they think they might be going up next week, because by the time there's really nothing you can do about your numbers. Your numbers are done. All right, they're in the system. It's, again, inadequate leadership, that they're not given the proper direction as they're going along. They're not looking at the plan. They're not assessing the plan and adjusting their plan because their plan wasn't working. Okay, so that's how I feel about that. Somebody asked in here, who was it? Kenneth Flores, did Leyson do the U.S. Open? He looks familiar. I did the U.S. Open for 10 years while I was in Queens North. So if I saw you there,
you played
I hope
tennis?
I treated you well.
Ron,
I did not play tennis, but I tell you,
right.
but I tell you what, I never had any interest in tennis whatsoever. I still don't have any interest. My nephew is awesome in tennis, and he's actually a tennis instructor now. That's what he does for a living. But I tell you, I came to respect tennis players so much by watching the U.S. Open. That is such a grueling sport. And there was one time where I was at the U.S. Open and I was down in the press pit, and there's balls coming at you at over 100 miles an hour. And in the press pit, which is behind the players, is open. So the balls can sometimes come in there if they're out and they don't get hit back. Woo, I'll tell you.
Yeah,
It
well,
was,
see, you were lucky. You were lucky because you were in that little pit. The rest of us slobs were out on the in the
you
beating
were up on the
heat.
roof. Who you kidding?
Well, with the counter sniper teams, but
Yeah.
the rest of those poor guys were out on these posts that couldn't get any food or anything else. I think
Oh, no.
that's
Not
one
when
of the
Leyson
worst
was there.
details. Worst
No,
details.
not when Leyson was there. There was always a barbecue going
Yeah,
back at the
not for
gate.
the not for the outside commands. No, you took care of
Absolutely
your
no. The
guys.
outside commands at the interagency lot. You guys had your own buffets going. But for the
That was the
workers at the
issue.
U.S. Open,
That that was the
huh?
issue we had. I gave you the thumbs up. That was the issue.
Yeah, and for the cops, there was the barbecue. So we had, you know,
And then you
wait,
know what? The poor guy that was on that detail. The next thing when they came back to their command because they flew, then they asked him, "Where's your summonses for the day?" There you go. I got.
he's saying I scolded him. I don't know. I don't remember scolding really anybody at the U.S. Open. That was a great detail. If I scolded you, I apologize if you felt that I inappropriately scolded you. If you didn't show up for the first day and you came the next day and you missed orientation, I don't know about scolding. I don't know if scolding is a good word. But you got anything?
Yeah.
I think we've. You have anything else you want to add with this?
No, I think we've covered everything. I mean, I kind of agree with you that if you have some sort of area that needs improvement and you direct that and the cops know why they're going there to write those summonses, then I agree. Then I agree with you. If it becomes number driven, which I can also say that it is, then it's a bad thing, right? So I think there's a fine line, but I think it needs to be definitively given out from management from the top all the way down, right? So
It's a couple of comments in here. Jose Vega, the U.S. Open was enjoyable. If that's Jose from Disorder Control, how you doing, brother? I hope you're enjoying retirement. I also see a Gino D. I believe I know who that is, and I believe when I first got Gino, let me know if this is you. I'm pretty sure it is. When I first got there, Gino isn't your official first name. That's not your legal name. And I called you by your legal name, and you let me have it as the CO when you first got there. So if that's you, God bless you. I hope everything's doing well. If not, God bless you anyway, and I hope you're doing well in your retirement. But I think, I believe that we've, we're not going to satisfy. There you go, Gino. God bless you, brother. We're not going to satisfy everybody with our perspective. There's going to be people that aren't going to see it. There's hopefully there's executives watching that listen to us and can come to a better understanding of what their job really is. And push back on the pressure by explaining what the right way to do it is. And I believe this is the right way to do it. It was successful for me in my positions. So, that's a very important.
One thing, and I wasn't really part of it, but what happens is prior to 9/11, ESU guys were required to give 5 tickets a month. ESU guys. So that's where so it was only after 9/11 because of the death of 14 ESU cops. They went to ESPO and said, ESPO, please, can we stop writing these tickets? And ESPO said, yeah, I got it, no problem. But how has that even been part of it? How is that
right?
That
ESU, it makes
paying
no
the piper,
sense.
Right?
Yeah, it makes no sense. See, that's silly. That's a number for a number. That's silly. The ESU's mission is not to write a summons. Listen, they're police officers or detectives. If they're out there and they see an egregious violation and they want to take action or feel that they need to take action, then that's their job as a law enforcement officer. But that's not their edict. That's not their mission to go out there. Their mission is to help the community and the cops in high pressure situations. I want to give a quick shout out to my man, my old driver, Bam Bam. I got your text. I see that you're watching. God bless you, brother. In North Carolina, you're in the mountains. I hope you're enjoying. I know you're enjoying your retirement. And I love you, brother. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. On that, remember to hit the like, subscribe, and join us here every Wednesday at 5:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 3:05. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's 2:05 for you, Eric, on the West Coast. And so it's again a very touchy subject. We're not going to satisfy everybody with our perspective. Some people are just not going to, think that we're being honest. We have no reason not to be honest and be disingenuous because we're not in the game anymore. We're speaking from our perspective as law enforcement officers, as executives with over 65 years of experience in the NYPD, with over 40 years combined of executives. I rose to the rank of full inspector. You rose to the rank of deputy chief in the NYPD. So I think that we do have a perspective on this and a lot of other things. And that's what we're going to be talking about every week on Wednesday at 5:05 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be talking about topics that you are not used to hearing executives talk about. It may be a piggyback off the 0805 Finest and Unfiltered with Eric and John, where they speak about a topic and it's topical. And we're going to give our executives' perspective on that because it was in the news or it's something that they spoke about. Otherwise, it may be something like this that we feel is just important. That's definitely always going to be topical. And so if you have any suggestions on anything you think that we should talk about, we ask you to reach out to us, throw it in the chat. We'll jot it down, take it into consideration. One of the things that we want to do in our closing segments is talk about something that from our experience and our perspective, we can do to try and help and guide members to navigate through the job. One of those things is, how do you set yourself up for advancement in your career? All right. I really believe that there's a misnomer out there that you need a hook. Now, again, before you start jumping all over me in the comments, you do have hooks. For those who are non-NYPD, a hook is somebody in a powerful or position of power that could take care of you. That is always going to be the case where your hook, your rabbi, can take care of you and get you into a position, get you into a detail or whatever the case. But there are a lot of things, and I believe it's a misnomer that you need a hook. I believe that that is actually the exception and not the rule. And it's the exception that everybody talks about because it's the blaring exception. Because when somebody goes into a detail that doesn't deserve it, everybody's going to talk about it. And that's just the truth. So I want to quote something that Joe Fox said one time, and it the true meaning to me, and I'm a believer in it. It says that it's not always who you know, it's who knows you. Now, Rob and I both came on this job, had no hooks, had no rabbis. Rob lived in New Jersey before he got on the job, right? And I was an EMT. I knew some cops. I didn't know anything. When I came on this job, I wanted to go to ESU because I was an EMT. I was working on a bus. I was an EMT instructor. And I said, hey, I want to go. I'm going to get on the job. And then I want to go to ESU. But just timing and the way the job laid out for me is the supervisory path took me down that road because the supervisor's test came up and I wound up going on the supervisor's path instead of going down to ESU. But I knew what I had to do to try and get to ESU with no hooks and things like that. It's the same thing. So Rob, coming from the executive officer of the Special Operations Division, you conducted interviews and did the interviews for ESU and other portions of SOD. So why don't you get into a little bit of what it takes, and does it take a hook, a crane to get into ESU?
I just like what Brian Lane just said, right? Hard work and dedication, and you make your own hooks, right? So that's a great statement.
Brian Lane was my admin sergeant in the 7-0 when I first got on the job. God bless you, Brian.
That's it. Good. And then there was another one by who's it? Boost Makai, I think.
Is that Busta Malaka?
Musa Malaka. I'm not
Busta
good with the
Malaka, our
Musa
friend for the day
Malaka.
cooks.
That's it. A rabbi or a crane, right? That was the old way to get there. So yeah, so if you want to get into a particular unit, I always say, have a plan, and you want to understand. You got to navigate your career, right? Because even if you have a crane at certain times, you might not, or a hook, you might that hook might die. A lot of times when you're on the job, you're the best. When you're retired, you're a pest. So
Yes.
if your crane or hook leaves, you're kind of left hanging. So I always say, just navigate your career before you even get on. Think about what you want to do. You want to be a cop, anything that you want to be before you become a cop, and set your goals. And especially once you get on, then you can make that, going into the right area, the right way. I think it differs between a big department, small department, right? So a big department like ours, there's a lot of opportunities, there's things. In a small department, it's a little harder, right? Because there's less details and less things you can do. But if you're committed and you want to do it, I'm going to guarantee that you can actually move in and get to those particular spots. So I know we're running short on time, Ron. I just want to, so briefly for
I
ESU,
got time.
you got time? All right. I don't want to keep you. I know you're older, so I know the early bird special and stuff. So
Oh.
sorry. So for ESU, there's a lot of things you can do. You have to make sure there's a checklist. I don't know if I said it on this podcast or a few others before, that there are I miss Chubby Rob CrossFit. It's called unhealthy eating habits. So what you need to do is you need to identify what's necessary for ESU. So if you're an EMT, a paramedic, you get points, right? So all these things. If you're scuba qualified, PADI certified, you get points. If you have a construction background, if you have volunteer fire department background, all of this background goes into points. So, but if you don't have it, then you got to do courses that can get you those points. Because once that point system's set down, you're going to have to look at all of that, and they're going to be evaluating that, and then you're going to get a point system, and then you're going to be graded or whatever. So it's the best if you, and this doesn't just goes for ESU. This goes for mounted, but that's a whole nother animal. No, I'm just kidding. But in mounted, you want to learn how to ride a horse. I have to know whether it's going to be if you're mounting from the floor or you're mounting on the horse from a stand. Harbor, like I said, you got to know ropes. You got to know how to operate a boat. Difference between diesel and a regular engine. These are all things that you got to learn. And the best way to do it is to talk to somebody in those units, get an idea, find out what's necessary, and then you work on getting your requirements, and then you can go. It's the hook, in my opinion, for these details. It exists, but it's not a necessity anymore. Not at all. So, I mean, Ronnie, I think you're more familiar with, like, in the precincts and the borough type
Yeah.
of thing. So if you want to touch base on that, how to get
Yeah, I
details
just
in the
think
borough.
Yeah, I just think in general it's all the same. It's preparing yourself, and I'm going to get into something in a second. But I just want to give another example, like you said, about how do you prepare yourself by taking care of yourself and doing your own work. You set these goals. You got to aim for these goals, right? You have to do what is necessary. We kind of tabled your highway example earlier. I'll just bring it back real quick. If there's somebody that has that has a knack or desire to go and wear the leather boots and the flat hat and go out there and ride a motorcycle and do highway enforcement, then you know what? Then maybe going out and being very proficient in writing summonses in the command, because you're starting out in the command, that may be your thing. And what I used to always tell people, and I used to be strict with my sergeants, listen, if there's somebody that has that desire, they want, like I had a guy come in and he wanted to go to highway and he was writing a ton of summonses, but he was getting a lot of backlash. He was getting a lot of feedback and negative feedback from the other people in his squad and his platoon saying that you're making me look bad. You're writing 30 summonses a month. What are you talking about? I'm only writing 10 and you're making me look bad. I told the sergeant, listen, Don't stifle that officer, but don't use him and say, Ron can write 30, but you can't write 10. Once again, it's not about the number. That person is driving himself or propelling himself towards a goal. He wants to go to highway. He wants to get proficient in writing traffic violations. He knows when he goes for a highway interview, they're going to look at his activity and they're going to look at that. So again, that's not a quota thing. That's not a, but don't use it against him and use him or her as leverage against other cops that aren't writing summonses. That's what that guy wants to do. God bless him. Encourage him. Make sure he's doing his job in the other aspects of his job. But if he wants to go above and beyond and write summonses, God bless him. I had a cop in the 111 precinct who wanted to go to aviation. Oh, who doesn't want to go fly helicopters for a living, right? Get paid all this money to go fly a helicopter. He didn't have a crane, but what did he do? He got his fixed wing license. He learned how to fly a plane on his own. Then he learned how to fly a helicopter, right? I don't know the process of learning to fly and the difference between a fixed wing airplane and a helicopter and what different certifications there are. And then he continued because he went for his aviation interview. He didn't get the job. So he continued. He went and he took more courses about, mechanics and this and that. Whatever he could do around learning how to fly a helicopter, he learned. And you know what? One day, after I was gone from the 111 precinct, I was down at aviation, and who walked out on the flight deck? This same cop. He got the job because he propelled himself into that position. He made himself desirable for the position. Okay? And now there's a member of the finest Unfiltered family. It's retired Lieutenant Commander Detective Squad Tom Joyce, who retired as a homicide commander of a homicide squad. And I spoke to him and I said to him, knowing that we were going to do this topic tonight, and I said, Tom, I could talk about, like you said, I could talk about precinct-based positions that people want to strive for. I can talk about borough-based positions that people want to strive for. I can talk about candidate assessment division and people that want to come and be an investigator and how they should set themselves up for that. But a very big path is patrol to the squad. How can guys set themselves up for the squad? And Tom Joyce has his own website, actually. It's called bespecialgood.com. So I'm going to go to that website real quick. If you could bring it up. Right. Be Special Good. Hit the tab up top, bespecialgood.com. Be Special Good. How to be special good. Up on the top. Up on the top. Go over to the right. What? Two more. There you go. All right. And then there it is. Right. What is special good? It's not enough to just be good. Good is not enough. And some people are special, but that's not enough either. You need to be special good. It's where you take your passion, your drive, your skills, your enthusiasm, your dream, put it to work. That's when you become special good. This is what I'm talking about. And there's 6 tenets of special goodness, right? Put in the work, be passionate, take pride in your work, be creative, make sacrifices, and get support. Now that's support. How is that support? That support could be your peers. It could be your supervisors. It could be anything, right? This is what I'm talking about. And when he talked to me, he gave me in an email what he looked for in interviews when he was interviewing for the squad, right? It's a stepping stone toward investigations. So he'd say, demonstrate passion, desire, integrity, give examples of tackling problems and devising a solution and being a critical thinker. Examples of following up on a lead to a successful conclusion. Out on patrol, you don't just need to be a report taker. Go out there and be proactive. Examples of working with the squad, looking for wanted witnesses, perps, making arrests in the vicinity of shootings and homicides locations so that the squad can debrief them. And then there's the other obvious things. Your disciplinary record, your sick record, your CCRB is all obvious, right? And also, again, it's who knows you. Because a lot of the people that wound up going up into the squad and getting positive interviews were recommended by the detectives in the squad because they said they were able to say, I work with Ron Leyson. Ron Leyson went out there, he got this perp for me, he got this witness for me. So these people are creating their own path. It's not just who you know. It's who knows you. So with that, I think that it was a good episode. It was a great conversation. I hope that people enjoyed it. You want to wrap things up, Rob?
Yeah, I just want a quick comment. One, with executives, any executives that are listening, when a cop wants a recommendation to go to one of these units, don't give them a below standards or just a meet standards. If they are above standards, because a lot of times we've gotten COs recs that say, yeah, great guy, great girl, but I'm short personnel and I can't afford to let this person go at this time. All I'm saying is don't hold somebody's career back. I understand your pain, but you know what? Those units that are picking that person up, they want the best candidate, right? So I mean that hurts that individual. And think about how that person feels when I had to call COs and say, I can't send this candidate information down to 1PP to pick this person up because you gave a meet standards. I need a better evaluation, or you write that you don't recommend them being transferred at this time. You gotta change it. And I would have to call them and have them change it. And it would infuriate me because, as an executive, I had to like almost pull my rank onto the CO or the precinct saying, listen, you're holding this guy back. And that's the worst thing you can do as an executive. Your
We can take
job
this
is
as a
to push people up, not to bring them down, especially the hard workers and the cops and the they go out there every day and do that job. If they do that job, good for you. How do you think they're not going to do a good job for ESU or one of the other units? So I'm sure that Terry Advent was one of those guys, right? And you wouldn't want to give him a bad evaluation just to keep him for yourself. Don't be selfish. That's what I'm basically saying. And push your people forward. Push your cops forward, and that will make you a better leader. Believe me.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you any more, and I could go on for another 20 minutes, as you all know, and talking about that. Because when I was a CO and you had people that were working for you, I remember one time in a 4-month period, I lost 3 anti-crime sergeants, and I had nobody left because the bench gets kind of thin, especially for anti-crime. You want the right people in those spots because I wouldn't hold people back. I got a phone call from Chief Terry Shortell, who was in charge of gang at the time, and she said, Ron, the following people all put in applications for gang. Who am I taking in what order? And I was honest with her, and I said, this person has more experience, this person's more senior, but this person should go first and second and third when they're picking them up. I'm not going to hold you back because, number one, you've earned it. You have done what I just described. You have worked and done your job in order to advance yourself in your career. Who am I to hold you back, to be, just like you said, selfish? And that used to annoy me so much when COs would do that. You got to propel your people forward. You got to help them. Like I said, we became the hook. We became the hook. Use it. One of the reasons I stayed on the job longer than a lot of people thought I should have was because I felt that I was able to help the cops and the sergeants and other people on this job through the relationships that I built in my career. And you know what? We could talk about evaluations as a whole nother segment on another podcast, without a doubt, because that's a total farce on how people do their evaluations. So with that, if you don't have anything else, Rob, I just want
to thank Eric and John. I know you feel the same way. Thanks for putting us out there. Marlon, does a lot of work for us. Sal and his important messages that he's always doing on his podcasts. And Jack behind the scenes, we wouldn't be able to do it without all, the staff and everybody
yelling at us because we're running along.
Yeah, exactly. But everybody that that helps us. This is like I said, I always say it's a very important podcast because it gets the message out. And listen, we want it. Ron and I, believe me, we want to help everybody. We want to do everything that we can. And I think our knowledge and our word will help you. Use it. And like you said earlier, Ron, give us feedback and give us topics that you're concerned and I will be glad to talk about it. Right. So
yeah, you could reach us right now through either sending us a chat. I'm getting text messages as we speak. Hey, how you doing, Tommy? I hope you're enjoying your retirement also. God bless you. And send us comments or through the website, through the Finest Unfiltered website. So with that, I think we'll close it out. We'll see you again next Wednesday at 5:05 p.m. for the Executive Perspective. Don't forget, tomorrow morning, 08:05 live at 8:05. You have Eric and John on New York's retired.
Did we lose Ron? They freeze there?
New York's retired and unfiltered podcast. Check us out on all the different platforms. Please like, share, and subscribe. We appreciate everything. Everybody be safe out there.
Yep,
See you next week.
safe.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888-901 Blue. That's 888-901 Blue.